Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative. We will be looking at H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds. It is in this wonderful collection, so you might see this book a few more times throughout this series. Now, War of the Worlds was published in 1898, and then it was serialized in 1897 by a magazine. And it was adapted to a stage show as well, which is Jeff Wayne's musical version, which has run for many, many years. I have seen it only once. I was hoping to go again. Obviously, coronavirus hit. Less said about that, the better. And it was also quite recently made into the miniseries by the BBC. However, I will be looking at the film that was released in 2005 starring Tom Cruise. Now, we will be looking at three things. Obviously, we'll be looking at how good is the book, how good is the film, and how well does the plot take from the book. So the film. So the film is set in America in the 21st century. It covers an alien invasion from Mars, and it stars Tom Cruise as a sort of like divorced dad with two kids. You know how it is, like they don't spend enough time, whatever. You've got the angsty teenager, the little kid and everything. Then you see sort of like the storm hits, the lightning hits, Martians come from under the surface of the earth. And this film brings it all. This film has you on the edge of your seat the entire way. I love how Ray, who is the main character, is just trying his best to be a dad and try and be calm, despite the fact that he knows that everything is going to hell. Despite the fact that he knows that, you know, these Martians have attacked. He doesn't know who they are. He doesn't know what they want. All he knows is they are destroying everything, and he just needs to get these two kids. He needs to look after them. He tries to get them to their mums. That doesn't work, so then he ends up on this big thing to get them to their grandparents or whatever. And it's honestly, it's so nice how it follows him. And Tom Cruise is just a general guy trying to look after his kids. And also I love the fact that he's trying to get them to the mum, because if everything goes wrong, who do you go to? Apparently the mother. So I love the lengths that he goes to while being this sort of like normal guy. And although I do prefer the stage show, and even the serialized BBC show was pretty decent as well, the film is good, and it honestly is one that despite how harrowing it can get, if you make it through the film, it is worth it, and I would definitely give it a 7 out of 10. It is a pretty decent film. Now the book. This story is riveting. Like, it essentially looks at the folly of man and how we believe ourselves to be above everything else, and that still goes on today. We think we are the epitome of everything. We think nothing can take us out, and when something does disrupt that, we don't believe it. It takes us a very long time to realize that we're maybe not top dog. And you see how quickly the Martians arrive, and then how quickly they destroy the whole hierarchy that is set in place. And even though it is sort of like England in the late 19th, early 20th century, it is still a case of, well, hang on a minute. They destroyed it so quickly. They knew exactly what they were doing, and nobody listened to anybody else, and everyone was out for themselves. Sound familiar? But it is scary, sort of like how you can still see similarities in what happened then and what happened today. My favourite little fact about this is, obviously, because it was first sort of like, it wasn't actually a book first, it was like a little serialized, like little, it was like on the radio, and people genuinely believed this was happening. When they were reading it out on the radio, they believed that it was an actual real life event, and I love that. Like, I honestly love that little fact. Always makes me chuckle. Now, as you start reading this story, you honestly feeling to yourself, you turn around and you go, why are they reacting like this? I can't believe it. Like, you do this, you do that. And then when you're put in a situation yourself, I can guarantee you wouldn't. I can guarantee you do exactly the same thing they did in the book. And honestly, I love the whole story of it. I love how it follows this one guy, and he keeps seeing these different things, and he's just sort of, it's all new to him essentially, and he realizes that he's actually not any better off than anybody else. And it is really good, and I love how the actual demise of the Martians has nothing to do with humans. It is just because they caught a virus and they died, and it was as simple as that. And it's just sort of like you see these humans think that they are the best thing, and they're not. And I love it. I really do. So the book gets an 8 out of 10 from me. It does. So anyway, so now we're on to the plot. So the film starts with the narrator, good old Morgan Freeman, telling us that no one would have believed in the early days of the 21st century. However, the film is set in America in the 21st century. The book starts with the same narration, but in England in the late 19th, early 20th century. Both mention that the Martians have been eyeing up Earth. So in the book, the Martians come to Earth in flashes of light like comets. They hit Earth and they kind of sit there in like this cylindrical thing for a few days and then they come out of it. In the film, it's lightning storms that inhibit machinery that has been buried underground. And you can see them kind of come through the lightning. So in the book, the whole village comes across to stare at this cylinder. And in the film, they pretty much do the same. Ray and everyone else goes to stare at where this whole thing happened. And in the book, the Martians come out of the cylinder and our narrator runs away. So just saying, in the film he's called Ray. In the book he is literally the narrator. He doesn't have a name. So I'm stealing from War of the Worlds, the musical, and calling him the narrator. Anyway, so the narrator runs away home and sort of like sits with his wife, but he's fascinated to see more. So as he's running, he kind of stops and turns around. So, you know, and you see this as well in the film, like they stop and they turn around and they look and then they realise that the Martians have built some sort of heat ray and it kills a lot of people around Ray. So he runs off to get his children. So in the film, the huge tripods that the Martians inhabit come up from below ground and straight away it starts blasting humans to dust and wrecking destruction everywhere. But at this point in the film is where Ray has run back to his children, got them to pack up some basics and have made their way to the available only working car. Because in the film, as they arrive, they send out like an EMP, which stops electricity for ages and basically takes out all the cars. So in the book, the narrator has now headed back to his house with his wife, and he has narrowly avoided death because he has now seen loads of people die around him. So he's now sort of chilled, and in the book they spend the Friday night just having dinner, not thinking about much of the Martian until they start hearing hammering when they're making machines out in the common. So, however, in the film, it's all go at this point. So Ray and the children even, I wrote chosen here for some reason, Ray and the chosen, or the children, flee in the car and they go to the mum's house. However, the mum's not there, the mum's at the grandma's. And in the book, as the first Martians are creating something, another cylinder comes to Earth. In the film, they all pretty much arrive at once in the space of like, you know, you hear the news reports and then suddenly it's happened. In the book, it's over a period of like a week these cylinders are hitting Earth. There's also there's a military presence very early on in the book. You don't really see it much in the film. So in the book, the narrator and his wife finally head off to Leatherhead to stay with his cousins as they realise that these Martians are actually quite dangerous. However, the narrator, once he's got his wife to Leatherhead, decides to return home to return the horse and cart to somebody that he's borrowed it off of. Now, as he's coming back, he sees the destruction and spots the machine that the Martians have built for the first time, this huge tripod figure. So obviously he then sees people are dead and everything like that, and he realises that in actuality these Martians are not happy people. Now in the film at this point, Ray and co have made it safely to his ex-wife's where they camp out in the basement because Ray's got this idea that he'd rather be in the basement safe than up in the house. Now in the book, while sheltering back at his home, the narrator meets the artilleryman. Again, we don't get given a name, so I'm calling him the artilleryman. Who tells him of what happened in the common and basically everyone being destroyed and the military being destroyed. So then they kind of become travelling companions for a little bit as they head back to Leatherhead again. The narrator's going to Leatherhead, artilleryman's going to London. They don't quite make it that far, unfortunately. So in the film, Ray and the children are sleeping in the basement when the house is destroyed by an aeroplane falling out of the sky. They go out in the morning and then they start heading to Boston, which is where the grandparents are, in the still running car at this point. In the book, as they're heading, the narrator sees the army take out one of the Martians in the machine, which is a big thing. They're like, oh yay, we've taken one out. However, they then all get destroyed. The narrator sort of ends up on like a little raft in the river because at one point the river's boiling because the heat ray's gone into it, and you've got all of that going on. Now in the film, they've come upon a village that is seemingly abandoned. However, there's a little bit of an eerie scene here where the little girl goes off to do her business, and she sees all the bodies just floating along in a river, just all the dead bodies, and it's a little bit harrowing if you're a child to see that, really. And you also see at this point as well, the army of now driving past, and Ray's son tries to get them to take him. Because yes, let's go off and fight the unbeatable Martians. Why not? So anyway, in the book, the narrator has drifted sunburned and very ill, and has come across a curate. The curate be crazy, like be proper crazy. And the curate is basically not a sane person. So meanwhile, we then get in the book as well a bit about the narrator's brother as well. So the narrator's brother resides in London. They don't realise how drastic the situation is until Monday morning, which is a full 3 days after it started. News that the Martians are heading to London hits his brother, and then he sees refugees from the neighbouring villages traipse in. Obviously, he's worried about his brother, but there's not much he can do. So then, he ends up having to go off and try and survive. Now, in the film, Ray and the children have come across a very angry mob that end up stealing the car from them and almost ends up killing them. So this then forces Ray and the children to continue on foot, and they end up seeing a friend and their daughter and try to board a boat. Now, in the book, the Martians have arrived now in London. They are smothering the city in a black smoke. Now, this black smoke, if you get caught in it, it's death. There is no alternative. In the book, you also hear about how they get organised because they have Martians that act, a building. Then you've got Martians that are acting as scouts. Then you've got Martians that are now destroying everything. And honestly, as well, you see, you read where they discharge the black smoke on any area thought to have a battalion waiting, or a regiment waiting, and they disperse this black smoke so that it'll kill anyone before this battalion can even take them out, which is scarily organised. So anyway, in the film, they've managed to board this ship as Ray and the children. However, as they're looking to leave, Martians have now come out of the trees. They capsize the ship. They kill hundreds of people. However, Ray and his kids manages to escape. Now, in the book, you get the exodus of people from London that seems similar to the escaping of the ship on the film. In fact, you do actually get an escaping of the ship in the book as well. So the narrator's brother manages to get out of London and ends up travelling with 2 women that he met on the road. However, the Martians appear to be everywhere. His brother does make it to the beach, where he makes it onto a ship with the 2 ladies. However, the Martians attack. You do have Thunderchild, which is like a submarine, comes and saves the ships and allows them to escape by taking on the Martians. So in the book, the ship escapes. In the film, it gets capsized. Now, in the film, Ray's son has now decided that he is going to fully run off and try to help the army defeat the Martians. And Ray has realised it's either trying to force his son to stay or looking after his daughter. So he chooses his daughter and ends up hiding in the cellar with a deranged young man. Well, middle-aged man, but deranged nonetheless. And at this point, the narrator is also trapped in a house with the curate due to the black smoke. However, when it dissipates, they both head off and see destruction and death everywhere they go. And the curate's mind doesn't seem to be the soundest, and it's becoming unsounder by the moment. So then they get stranded in a house due to a 5th cylinder exploding near the house, and then they hear the Martians building. So they're now stuck in this other house, and they can't get out. Now, in the film, there's a long, tense sequence where the Martians are coming through as they are. They send out a stalk as well with an eye that is searching through all the basement they're trapped in. And it's honestly, it's so tense. You just sat there like almost not breathing as you're watching it. In the book, as they're trapped in the half-destroyed house, the narrator sees the Martians assembling their machines and gets to just view them a little bit more. Now, in both, we find out that the Martians survive by drinking the blood of humans, which is not a very good thing to have. And we're also introduced to the red weed, which takes over everything. So the curate is now slowly going insane and becomes a risk now to the narrator, so the narrator takes him out. In the film, the deranged man that's stuck with Ray becomes a risk to his daughter and him, so Ray has to kill the guy. And in both, they almost get caught by a Martian. So then you've got, in the narrator then manages to live in this cellar for like 5 days without food or water. and then escapes from the house and sees wildlife coming back to the ruins around him. In the film, Ray's daughter gets captured by the Martians, so he then gets caught and then uses grenades to blow up one of the Martians from the inside. In both, they're carrying on their journey, but now they're seeing the Red Weeders beginning to die. Now, while the narrator is travelling to find his wife, he comes across the artilleryman again from his earlier days, and this young man suggests moving and living underground so they won't end up being picked off by the Martians and they can build a whole new world. He realises quite quickly this isn't going to work, stays with him for a day or two, and then heads off to London. And then the narrator comes across the dead and dying humans and Martians in London. Now, in the film, as Ray and his daughter are going through the town to get to the grandma's, they see the huge machines faltering and realise that they're dying. So the film ends with Ray and his daughter getting to Boston and being reunited with his ex, his son, who somehow survives, and his ex's parents, and all the Martians have died. The book ends with the narrator going back home, where he then finds his wife and his cousin safe and sound, and they kind of live happily ever after, as it were. And in both, we find out that it was actually bacteria that ended the Martians' lives and the simple viruses, rather than anything us humans actually did. Now, something I did notice in the book is the Martians don't really only attack London and pretty much just the south of the UK at this point. But in the film, it's the entire world that they attack all at once. So the plot, the setting, the characters are completely different. It's like the film took the overall idea of War of the Worlds, but then just put its whole modern twist on it. Both narratives are very good, and I did enjoy both narratives. However, as far as the plot goes, it gets a 2 out of 10 from me, as it had just the bare bones of the story, literally Martians attacking, and that's pretty much it. This is my own opinion, of course. If you agree or disagree with anything that I've said, please leave it below in the comments. Don't forget to click subscribe and like so you're alerted whenever a new video becomes available. And until then, remember to always keep it contento.